has a funny way of showing you lessons. Years I would stare up in the sky with so many questions.
Welcome. And to those of you who saw my 5 radical relationship tips video, welcome back. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. I wanted to jump on today because I really wanted to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart as well as a lot of my patients' hearts, and that is parenting. I have a lot of clients who are parents, who are parenting adolescents or young adults, and I have a lot of young adults who are transitioning into adulthood. So I work with the parent and I also work with the young adults who are attempting to navigate relationships with their parents. So I find myself sometimes covering some of the same topics often in therapy. So I really wanted to jump on here and share some of these quick tips with you guys, and hopefully they'll be beneficial, and hopefully you'll agree. I first want to talk about something that I always find strange when I talk to my parents, right? Um, I don't know if anybody else ever thought about this, but a lot of times when we talk about our children, no matter how old they are, right? We refer to them as children. We refer to them as children. We don't often, if someone walks up and says, "Well, how many kids you got?" Right? And they could be 30, 40 years old, and we would say, "Oh, I got 2, I got 3, I got 5," right? There's no word, right, that's comfortable for us to replace child when we have those type of conversations. So we often refer to them as children. I just always found that strange. But anyways, moving into something that I really want to talk about before I get into the actual tips, and I think it's extremely important, is adolescence. I think adolescence is the hardest thing to navigate for a parent. We often experience behaviors from our adolescent that will leave us dumbstruck. When we look at them and say, "What on earth were you thinking?" Like, we try to make sense of it, right? Because some of the stuff that adolescents do is so outlandish. It's like, what are you, not only what are you thinking, were you thinking, right? And I often talk about something that is very, very important for parents to understand in order to understand adolescence, and that's brain development. Adolescents are going through a process in adolescence called hardwiring, right? And there's been so much research on this process and the effect that it has on adolescents, right? During hardwiring, the brain is changing rapidly. And the way that I always explain it to the parents is between the age of 0 to 5 years old, the brain is going to grow the most. It's going to grow the most. And during adolescence, the brain is going to change the most and rapidly, change rapidly, right? During hardwiring, when all those neural networks and pathways are, right, going crazy in the adolescent brain, right? A lot of behaviors have been research proves that a lot of the behaviors are influenced by the hardwiring process. Some of those behaviors are impulsivity, acting impulsively, um, misunderstanding or misinterpreting social cues and emotions, getting into altercations and all kinds of accidents. Also, high risk behaviors. Some kids do things that you say, what the heck is wrong with you? Right? But all of these things have been proven, right, to be influenced by the hardwiring process. So I really, really kind of wanted to touch on that, right? But I want to also say that I am not in any way saying that the adolescent should not be held accountable. for their actions. That's not what I'm saying, right? But what I do recommend is that we hold the adolescent to the previously displayed level of understanding that they have displayed in a similar or same situation, right? So what I mean by that is if we know that they know better, and I'm not talking about what we think they should know. I'm talking about the fact that they've been in a similar situation before and they displayed a healthier response, right? And not just once, not just that one time, right? But we know that repetitively they have made a better decision, right? Holding them to the level of displayed understanding. That I think is important. But I just really wanted to kind of jump into that. You know, adolescent isn't the focus, but I really did think that that was important. I didn't feel like I can do a parenting video without talking about adolescence, because it's such a big and difficult time in parenting. But I really have some areas of some specific areas that I want to touch on. And the first area is discipline. Now, I'm not getting into discipline, whether a person should choose corporal punishment or non-corporal punishment. That's totally up to the parent. I am not weighing in either way, right? Whatever a parent decide or how they choose, right? But what I am saying in terms of discipline is there are certain things that we have to be conscientious of. One of them is based on the very common saying that a lot of parents say, and it is, this is going to hurt me, or this does hurt me more than it hurts you. I really wanted to talk about that because I don't think that that's a foreign concept or a foreign saying. I think that if you haven't said it, you probably heard somebody say it, or your parent has probably said it to you. If that is true, right? When we're administering consequences or punishment to our adolescent or our child, right? That it's hurting us more than it's hurting them, then we're probably not doing it right. That's important to understand. The purpose of consequences, and I talked a little bit about this in my previous video, the 5 radical relationship tips about boundaries and consequences, right? And that's all it is. We set rules in the house. If they break the rules, we administer some form of punishment, right? Same thing, same concept, right? Boundaries and consequences, right? Boundaries are not effective if they don't have consequences, right? And the goal, right, of the consequence is to cause some level of distress in the hopes of modifying the person's behavior, right? So when you think about that, right, and you think about the saying, this hurts me, or this is going to hurt me, or distress me more than it's going to distress you, whose behavior do you think is going to be modified the soonest? The parents, right? Because if it's true that this is hurting me more than it's hurting you, right? And the goal of consequences is to modify behavior, right? The reality is that the parent is probably going to begin to modify their behavior before the child ever will, right? So we have to, or I should say, consequences should be more distressing to the child than it is to the parent. And the second thing in terms of discipline that I want to talk about, the second tip that I want to talk about is reacting an emotion. And I'm not just talking about sadness or more vulnerable emotions. I'm talking about anger. Responding to your child's negative behavior, right, with anger. I heard a long time ago that it's very, very important not to discipline our children when we're angry, right? Not only to avoid the potential of abuse or over, right, exhibiting or over administering a consequence or a punishment, but also, right, there's something that is happening when we are disciplining our children when we're angry. There's something that is occurring. Hold on, let me shut this off because this is messing with me, y'all. Okay. There's something that is occurring when we administer a consequence when we're angry, right? And I talk a lot about narratives in therapy, right? There's narratives to everything, right? So I describe narratives as that background music, that thing that subconscious, that thing that's playing in our subconscious, right? When we discipline our children when we're angry, right? The narrative that can be adopted by the child is that mommy or daddy disciplined me because they were angry. That's what they will think, right? Because we know better, right? But we're talking about the mind of a child, right? And if I have this big reaction, right, and I explode because I'm just so pissed, right, at whatever it is that they did, right? We have to understand that the child is going to pay attention to the bigger thing, right? And if they did a behavior, right, they probably don't see that as big a thing as the reaction that they're now seeing in front of them, being displayed in front of them, right? So in their mind, they're being disciplined because you're angry, because you're mad, right? They depending on the child, right, may not be able to put the concept together that they're being disciplined because of their behavior, right? They're being disciplined because you're mad, right? Because if they displayed the behavior and you wasn't mad, they might not have experienced that particular consequence, right? So what I would recommend to parents, if you want to parent in a healthy manner, is to tell your child, if you find yourself enraged, telling your child, go to your room, I'll be there to administer your punishment, or however you verbalize it, right? In a minute. And taking a few moments to process your emotion or to calm down. And a lot of parents, it's foreign to a lot of parents, because most parents, if they calm down, probably don't feel or desire to punish, right? So we're kind of using that anger or that rage, right, to motivate us to administer the punishment. Because if we calm down, we may not feel like punishing in the form or to the extent, right, that we are displaying, right? But I'll say this, if you calm down and you don't feel, right, that the consequence that was in mind prior to you calming down is the consequence that should be administered, then you may need to rethink the level of offense of the behavior in the first place, right? So I just recommend always being calm as potentially possible. I'll say that. Okay. The next tip has to do with transitioning. I talk about transitioning a lot. I talk about transitioning with parents, but I also talk about transitioning with young adults who are attempting to navigate relationships with their parents, right? Because I realize that a pattern is happening. A very common pattern is happening. With the parent, I often talk about how they never transition their parental style. Some of us are still parenting our young adult or adult children the same way we parent our 3-year-old and our 13-year-old, right? 23. I think it's important to understand from the time that a child comes into the world, they come in a newborn, they become an infant, a toddler, a child, a preteen, right? A teenager or adolescent, a young adult, and then an adult. They transition, right? All those times. And we as parents don't feel the need to transition our parental style. If you think about it, really doesn't makes sense, right? Now, in terms of what your style is, right? Everyone has different parenting styles. Like I said, some people opt for corporal punishment, some people opt for non-corporal punishment, right? Your parenting style, whether you're authoritative or authoritarian, right? Whatever your parental style is, I'm not weighing in either way, right? But what I am saying is that your parenting style should be transitioning. That's important. I'm realizing that we often don't do that. And if you grew up in the type of household that I grew up in an African American household, consequences in parenting look the same from generation to generation to generation. And it didn't often alter, right? And then when we have our kids, we often punish our children the same way we were punished, or consequence our children the same way we were consequenced. Which, if you think about what I'm saying, all of the transitions that they go through, why are we not transitioning with them? So adopting a different style, or transitioning your style so that it's age appropriate, always taking into consideration the age of the individual that you're dealing with, and that's how you can begin to transition your style. Another thing is, in terms of transitioning, is I deal with a lot of young adults who have challenges transitioning into adulthood. And that's because they expect their parents to parent them the same way throughout their entire life, right? So when they have needs, or when they have wants, their parent is responsible for giving it to them forever, right? It's unfair. It's really unfair when we're talking about a young adult or adult. Sometimes they're adults, right? And everybody reaches adulthood at different ages. So, or their display of adulthood and level of understanding of functioning in adulthood at different times, right? But it's very, very important to understand that as we become adults, this is no longer a parent-child relationship, because we're no longer children, right? We have to understand that we are now entering into a different type of relationship with our parent. It doesn't change the fact that they are our parent, they forever will be our parent, but how that parent functions within the relationship has to have room to transition or change. It has to, right? Can't expect your parent to parent you forever and you are an adult. I often tell my clients they have to understand, when you go into young adulthood or adulthood, you enter into these areas of your life. You are no longer parent-child relationship. This is now a relationship between two adults. This is two adults deciding to continue in relationship. That's, I think, a concept that is lost on most people. These are two adults, right? So there are certain sacrifices that come along with parenting, right? We make sacrifices. Sacrificing is a big part of parenting. But are we supposed to be forever in the position of sacrificing? Forever? How fair is that? Right? I make a decision to parent, absolutely. Right? But at some point, right, it has to transition. The relationship has to transition. Right? So understanding that an adult relationship calls for information seeking and increasing understanding and acceptance of the other individual. The young adult should now be seeking information, right, about who this person is, right? now, who their parent is now, what their parents' desires are, what their parents want and don't want, what they will do, what they won't do, right? Not holding them to something that they agreed to do when they were in the childhood stage, right? So information seeking and increasing acceptance. This is a hard, I realize this is a hard thing to do for youth or adolescents who experience trauma, or what we call adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, childhood trauma. Because if you feel that your parent owes you because they didn't do what they were supposed to do when you're a child, you may struggle to get to the adult stage, relationship stage of parenting. But there are a lot of youth that didn't experience ACEs, and take on this way of thinking. And those are the young adults that I'm hoping to address. Your parents have done their job. They raised you the best that they know how they raised you, right? But most parents do the best that they can do with what they have or what they know at the time, right? So if your parent did the best that they could and did all that they can do, right? Holding their feet to the fire to forever owe you or to ever be in a position of sacrifice is extremely unfair and to some degree selfish. This is the biggest challenge that I see that my young adults have in terms of transitioning into adulthood. And I find myself addressing this often with young adults. Seek to increase understanding of the person that's in front of you, not from a parental perspective, but as a person. Your parent is a person. They have wants, they desires, they have needs, right? So if you choose to transition into adulthood, you can't kind of jump back and forth, right? Between being a child, right? Or having childlike demands in adulthood and wanting to declare yourself as an adult. Transitioning into adulthood in a healthy manner requires also transitioning the relationship between yourself and your parent. Because we are now two adult individuals making a conscientious choice to continue in relationship. I thought that that was important to share and for people to understand. Well, that is all the tips that I have on healthy parenting today. I hope that you enjoyed what you're hearing today. And if you have any questions in regard to some of the things that I said, feel free to comment. I look forward to seeing you all. I probably won't do another video this year. I only have a couple more days left, but I look forward to seeing you guys and doing some more stuff, some more videos and tips for you in the coming year. Everyone have a very blessed new year and be safe.
If I never went through it, I'd have never found love.